We are filmmakers, designers, visual storytellers, so you are gonna see a lot of slides because we got a lot of stuff to show you, and we're believers in seeing explains everything. So breaking story is a term from Hollywood TV writer rooms, film rooms, and it speaks to the process of figuring out what your characters' arcs are gonna be, what everyone's journey is in the movie, how you're going to lay out your story. And then Barriers is a brand that we're all exploring that is about what are the barriers that are keeping you from engaging. Now we focus on climate protagonism, we call it, but really it's barriers to anything, barriers to anything. There was one other thing I was gonna tell you. Oh no, goody, we get to just start. Yay. Okay, so stories, a really brief word about stories. Super powerful. They define who we are, they demonstrate what we care about, and they illustrate what can be. I know you know this, but I just want to touch base on it for a moment so we all recognize the power that we're dealing with here. They emphasize who we are, what we care about. And in this case, Steve Jobs cared about ease of use. And they emphasize what can be. And these obviously revolutionized the world. So great story has power. The other thing about it is that it can control time. And what I mean by that is it shapes our understanding of the past, and storytelling can also show us the path for the future. And I'm going to just show you a little clip right now of probably one of the most famous forward storytelling moments, famous storytelling moments ever from history. It's going to take a minute. Some of you may have been there.
Even though I realize that this is, in some measure, an act of faith and vision, for we do not now know what benefits await us. But if I were to say, my fellow citizens, that we shall send to the moon 240,000 miles away from the control station in Houston, a giant rocket more than 300 feet tall, the length of this football field, made of new metal alloys, some of which have not yet been invented, capable of standing heat and stresses several times more than have ever been experienced, fitted together with a precision better than the finest watch, carrying all the equipment needed for propulsion, guidance, control, communications, food, and survival on an untried mission to an unknown celestial body, and then return it safely to Earth, re-entering the atmosphere at speeds of over 25,000 miles per hour, causing heat about half that on the temperature of the sun, almost as hot as it is here today, and do all this, and do all this, and do it right, and do it first before this decade is out, then we must be bold.
So a great story not only has power, a great story is power. Today, I'm going to walk you through some storytelling techniques that I have learned in my career, which we'll talk about in a moment. And then I'm going to hand the mic over to my colleagues who all have amazing stories to tell you as well. And then we're hoping to have some time to maybe workshop some things with you or Q&A. We have a handout, it's a really simple handout for everybody. Just to take notes on, little information about us, just to get the thing going. All right. Here's my quickie story lesson for y'all. A really great story sits on a three-legged stool. It's not that stool on the left. Think about the stool on the right. And the reason that's important is your three story pillars, which I'm going to describe for you in a minute, need to be notched together. They need to lean against each other. And that ring there, that's a ring of tension. That's what's moving your story forward, is how are these three things going to work out? Oops, let me go back. I said I would give you a little bit of update on my career, so just so you know, I spent about a decade in the story rooms of Dreamworks animation and Disney animation. So my career really stems from the opportunity to have nothing and put the story in, okay? And so we're going to start by looking at that for a moment. And I'm going to take a super fun, I'm going to tell you what the story pillars are first. The first one is your world. Where is your story taking place? And it doesn't necessarily mean the location, but it means the rules, the context. What are your characters going to just beat up against? What is going to define where they're standing? The next pillar is your protagonist. This critical thing about the protagonist is your protagonist has to drive the story. It cannot be just somebody sitting and waiting. They can sit and wait for 90% of the story, but by the third act, they got to get up and do something or it's not their story, okay? And then the third thing is the theme. Theme is tricky. I'm hoping through these examples, you'll get to have a sense of it. What is this story about? And the thing to know is the world and the protagonist can change, one, both, but the theme does not change, okay? So keep going with me. We're going to take a super easy example, as I promised. Hey, let's take this one. So this was greenlit into production on those 3 words, Kung Fu Panda. Jeffrey Katzenberg said, I want that movie. There was no picture there, but there was those 3 words. And we had to start with that and look at it. And I can see why it's appealing in animation. Nothing sounds more fun than watching a panda do Kung Fu. But the theme is sitting in there, and it's exactly what I had mentioned of like, the theme is Kung Fu is an extremely athletic activity, and a panda is not an athletic animal. So right there, you have a theme of defying expectations. Now, I got to put this story somewhere, and I want to put it in the place where Kung Fu is practiced at its highest art form, because I want to make those expectations really high, right? I'm leaning into my theme. So I'm going to ancient China. I'm going to a place where the dojos are terrifying and only the best people train there. And by the way, a little thing, when you throw an animal in as your main character, you got to figure out what other animals live in your world. And we populated it with pigs and chickens and ducks and all animals that couldn't defend themselves. Again, raising the stakes of this panda who is going to need to do Kung Fu. Are you following me? How the math is coming together here? And then the last piece is, by the way, you have to figure out what they're going to eat when you have a world of animals. They can't be eating each other. It doesn't work. So we went to ancient vegan China. Don't know if you're aware of it, but long history. The panda, again, to grind against the theme with your tension, needs to be the least likely character ever to do Kung Fu at all. He's not your most athletic panda. He's your least athletic panda. He's uncoordinated, he loves to eat, and he's incredibly lazy. And now you have the legs of your stool, and they all work against each other. And now everything, your story is that little leather seat on the top where you put your facts. And all your facts have to resonate in your stool, okay? And that's how you make a $600 million movie and launch a global franchise. Hey, let's do another one. You guys know this movie? Awesome film. Brad Bird, the director, stewed on it for 10 years before he was ready to bring it forth. He wanted it to take place in the world he loved as a kid. Adventure movies, spy movies, comedies, TV shows, and big comic book things. But he also wanted to tell a story about family. His family that he grew up with, and his wife and his son. Just what family was. And when you have a comic book world of superheroes with a family theme, you need a family of superheroes. Meet the Incredibles. So the log line here, just to show you how it works on your stool, is in a world full of superheroes, a family with incredible powers learns the most important thing they have is each other. Okay? And if you ever watch the movie, by the way, it's a great movie to watch with your family. Let's do this one. You guys know this movie? The reason I picked this one is it's a bigger world, much bigger world. It's fun to play in those little movies, but now let's talk about something with lots and lots of stuff going on. Start with the first one. George Lucas wanted to make a movie about the hero's journey, and he wanted to set it in a modern world. He wanted to set it in a multi-planetary universe with lots of optics and effects, because George Lucas wanted to start ILM. So here we are. But he also did something else really interesting in this world. He made a mysterious and ubiquitous power called the Force that the Jedi can access some, the Sith can access, and sort of anyone with the right powers, which is a great way to mix up what is ultimately the most classic theme ever, good versus evil. And when you make a film where the theme is good versus evil, evil should be all-powerful, giant Death Stars and villains that breathe through masks. And your protagonist should be like a nobody, like literally a random, insignificant creature in the universe, so that you can bring him up and push against that theme. And the great thing is when you build your stool strong enough, you can tell stories forever. You can expand your world, you can keep adding chapters, you can keep going on. Your world, your theme, and by the way, nearly every protagonist comes from insignificance in Star Wars. Until you find out, of course, that they're the son of the villain and the lost twin brother of the princess and like that. But they start off as nobodies. And the reason I wanted to use this one is there's really a lot of stories that we are going to need to tell with groups of us and teams of us. And we need to think about multiple protagonists and themes that unite us all, and the world that we are together trying to change. So I know you're all thinking, it's so easy when you have a movie with nothing and you get to pour everything in. But what when I live in the real world, this complicated, roiling world we're in now, where there's just tons of stuff and you don't know how to parse through it and find the things that are important in the story. And so I want to just take you through a live action story, a live person story that we all know. And the person I randomly picked was Dame Jane Goodall. Jane Goodall, as a little girl, received a stuffed monkey as a gift instead of a teddy bear. And it just formed a fondness for primates in her from a very young age. She wanted to go off and study them. Now, my thesis is also it made her really comfortable sitting next to them for long hours of time. But that's an aside. The world she grew up in was a world where humans thought that they were vastly superior to all species, including primates. And one of the main pieces of evidence was that no other species uses tools. Well, I think we all know that Jane Goodall went out and proved that not only do monkeys use tools, but they kiss, they hug, they wave goodbye, and they even mourn the dead. And I would argue that the theme of Jane's story is that we all have actually an innate kinship. And that was Jane's story until about the mid-'80s. And then she realized the world had actually changed. And this was Jane's story until the mid-'80s. And then she realized the world had changed. And now humans were using animals at an incredible rate between labs, sports, food, entertainment, research. We were consuming animals, and that was very upsetting to her. And because she's now a very different protagonist, she decided to take on that theme. She changed her theme to animal conservation. Now, if I were telling a full story of Jane Goodall instead of the way I told it to you in two different parts, I would argue that the theme is humanity. See how I changed that to make it a bigger umbrella? or make it a smaller umbrella depending on what your story is. Small, big, you can scale the story you're telling. Actually, let me go back. So I talked a long time. I really want you to hear from my colleagues, but I'm going to take you through one true life world story just to show you how it can work. And I decided to pick this story. In the 60s, auto crashes were often fatal. I mean, horrifically fatal. And the Department of Transportation realized they needed to focus on traffic safety. So they put in a seatbelt law. And a few years later, they realized that's not enough. We're needing to start a whole administration focused on this. The NHTSA. So the NHTSA, in 50 years, between 1970 and 2020, required all imported autos to comply with US safety standards, launched public safety awareness campaigns, mandated bumper design, and a national speed limit, issued headlight and speedometer specs, standardized sobriety tests, initiated airbag investigations, and standardized crash tests to help automakers build safer cars. In the 50 years between 1970 and 2020, the NHTSA cut the number of fatalities per 100,000 cars by 1/3, while at the same time, the number of cars on the road in the United States went up by 2.5 times. They did this over the course of 15 different directors with a smaller budget than most federal agencies have and a smaller staff. That's my team story. Did you notice how every detail I gave you sat in this stool? Right? It was about the theme, it was about our protagonist, and it was about how they're changing their world. I know all of you are bummed that I picked that story when we were making so many groovy ones. But I want to take a minute and just say, why did I walk you through this today? By the way, their theme is people saving people. I forgot to tell you that. Why I'm walking you through this today is because it is going to be really important for all of us to get our stories together. Those of us who are alive right now, we're going to need to tell the story to all future generations of what we did when we saw that the world was burning up. We're going to need to answer to all those future generations. And we need to start getting our story together. And we need to tell forward-looking stories like JFK did about what we're going to do. And what I want to do now is turn the stage over to my 3 colleagues, all badass women, who are in the middle of telling their own forward-looking stories.
All right. I'll shake your hand too if you want, Kristina. Thank you for passing it up to me. Before I start, my name is Nina Stotler. I'm the founder of the Museum of Earth, and I wanted to remind you those fancy little handouts that we gave you. They are rife for taking notes on any of your own ideas about your theme, your world, who you are as a protagonist. And I'm only reminding you because at the end we're going to do a little Q&A and talk through that somewhat. So to start it off, I would like to reiterate or come back to Kristina's point about the power of stories to look at who we are, what we care about, and what can be, and tell you my own story. So I have been a cultural futurist and strategist for about 20 years, and I lead brands into a vision of what their story is all about, communications and product development for companies like Reebok and the North Face. And by helping these companies figure out what their storytelling methodology is, I feel that I have actually found my own. I've found my theme. And in no small part did Kristina help me in making that more succinct. So thanks, Kristina. So, my work is based on an understanding of what matters right now to the audiences of many different companies and what will matter most in the future. that's really what trend forecasting, which is, my less favorite word for my industry, that's what it's really all about. It's, I love recognizing the patterns in how our narrative is unfolding. It's kind of like a story code, future unlock for knowing where you were and knowing where you're going. And, the teams I work with, to get into our nice little structure here of world, theme, protagonist, they are very familiar with their worlds. It's the state of things that they're dealing with. It's their challenge. And for a very long time, my world was design and communications. So I started out as a magazine editor in New York, where I was traveling the globe, chasing down, the latest talent, emerging talent to write stories. I then transitioned into taking those trends and working directly with fashion brands for two of the biggest forecasting agencies in the world. And from there, I became a consultant directly for companies like Cole Haan. And then I had the amazing opportunity to even develop materials for Louis Vuitton and Celine and Chanel. Then I decided to leave New York for the relatively rural wilds of Los Angeles. And there I began working with major outdoor brands and retailers with a very good friend of mine, Janine Pesh, and her outdoor agency Range. So I quickly learned a lot. First off, that I did not have to wear 5-inch heels anymore. And also that what the challenge was that those companies were really facing. And it was a common challenge among all of them. I found that, many people are disconnected from nature and lack access to the outdoors. And, I think I have really taken that for granted in my own life. And something that Ben Davis said yesterday during his talk really stuck with me, which was about being intentional about how you get outside. Thinking about it as not just an assumption, thinking about the healing power of nature. And I think that, I grew up in the suburbs. I had a lot of access to nature. I got out, into the lake and the trees, and it was an assumption that I would have that. But however, in the years since, in the New York and LA times, I really realized how disconnected I personally was from the outdoors. And the more that I helped these companies tackle this challenge in their world, the more I realized it was something that I cared about very deeply myself as well. So because these teams in the outdoor industry are not disconnected from the outdoors or from nature, it's a challenge that they can really clearly see and that they can help solve for other people. They're really perfectly poised to become protagonists in their own story. So strong protagonists have foresight. And they're really willing to fight for that future. They're really willing to fight for what can be a better world. And I saw that very firsthand when I was delving into that work. So, developing these brand campaigns for companies, and also, even editing a magazine dedicated to the outdoors. So I was writing and editing for that for a long time. And what I saw was people were submitting stories to us that were the most deeply personal, revelations that they had, whether it was on a small level from, spending time in their backyards all the way up into huge adventures. And, I also then went to organize a community hub at the Outdoor Retailer Trade Show. And that was fantastic because I got to talk to people one-on-one and hear these really, awe-inspiring personal stories of what they did outdoors every day, which a lot of us don't get the chance to do. So things like scaling an enormous peak at sunset and even bikepacking across the Mojave. And what struck me as somebody who was, sort of learning and still entering that world was not just that it sounded awesome to do those things, but also the fact that it really drove their involvement in all different types of action and activism. So it was the basis of that. And so I, realized that my own moments of awe in nature also held meaning. So that's me scaling a very not large rock in Joshua Tree. But, this awe can help you figure out in your story that future vision, that future of what can be in your world. So really quick, before I hand it over to my colleagues here, connecting people to the outdoors is a challenge that I tackled specifically for one major outdoor brand. And, you know, for months and months and months, we worked on a strategy. We built a wonderful brand book with all kinds of interviews with their audience and people who they worked with. We did a campaign film and we crafted a mission statement. So where we ended up on that, you know, we landed on what their true goal was, which was empowering everyone to get outside, connect meaningfully, and forge a deeper bond between people, place, and planet. And what I realized in doing that was that their theme and you know what we developed there was actually my own journey. It was my own theme. And I knew that I actually had something different and maybe a little outside the box to offer in this space, which was based on, you know, decades of building cultural relevance in fashion, of understanding how that works, combined with my own personal, you know, emotional connection to the outdoors and the vision of how powerful that could be. And that led to the founding of my startup, the Museum of Earth. So the Museum of Earth is an experience and content company that uses awe to inspire environmental action as well as connection and innovation. And what our mission really is to, you know, empower everyone to be stewards of the planet and to create these shared experiences that change mindsets, as well as what I think is quite important, showing people a very infinite path to take action, you know, something that's accessible, something that's right there in front of them. And our team is made up of communications experts, brand strategists, such as Kristina right here next to me. And, you know, we believe deeply that making cultural relevance is critical to unlocking and driving action. So, you know, we're really partnering with regenerative designers, with climate experts, with trusted organizations to take that curiosity into real action. And finally, we have a new collaboration here that Kristina had mentioned with PROWL, who we're super excited about, and it's a new barriers content series. So, you know, as Kristina mentioned, it's about roadblocks to environmental action. And where that starts is with an interactive exercise that IDs emotions, you know, climate anxiety, eco-grief, eco-anger. And it has a toolkit of resources that we're building on an ongoing basis for helping you tackle those own barriers in your life. Because we really felt that, you know, people don't like to talk out loud about those feelings, even if they are recognizing what they are, and how can we bridge that gap for that barrier, for the emotional and personal barrier. So if you look at the back of your handout, which now I've mentioned way too many times, there's a QR code where you can access the full report, and we are looking to expand this as a platform further. So if you have feedback, you know, our contact information is on there too. We welcome your feedback. We really want to build this together. And with that, I want to turn it over to PROWL to tell their stories.
Yay.
Thank you both so much. So much of becoming protagonists at PROWL was really looking at the skills that we have and we have gained over our careers and over our educations, and ask what we want to put them towards something that we really care about in a world that we wanted to shape. For those, many of you I haven't met yet, I'm Baillie, and I've worked as an industrial designer for over a decade, bringing numerous products to market, from home decor and furniture, having hand in exhibition design, and even a textile line. Working for major brands you might have heard of, like Pottery Barn, Steelcase, and Coalesce, which is actually way back when Lauryn and I met. It's a picture of us from some time ago.
Can't really tell, but you.
And industrial design is really responsible for the creation of the tangible world. All the chairs you're sitting in, all this amazing production equipment, footwear, consumer goods, hardware. It really creates everything around us. It's, for me, sort of this intersection between art and engineering. And if you've never heard of industrial design before, I hadn't either before arriving to college, where I attended the Cleveland Institute of Art. But I was immediately captivated by the methodical, investigative processes within the practice, and really this problem-solving initiative that the whole profession really goes after. But in creating solutions in this problem-solving way has led to new problems. Problems of making all of this stuff that essentially has led to a lot of pollution by use of overconsumption, toxic materials, poor disposal practices, and it's presented kind of a new opportunity in what we've seen at PROWL to kind of strive against in order to challenge this world that is really polluting this planet that, for me, I love so much, that everyone up here on the stage loves so much. So for the last 75 years, human-centered design has really sort of been the foundation in which industrial design is practiced against, and many other fields as well: business, management, engineering, finances. And simply what it does is including the human perspective in solving problems creatively. And while that's been really beneficial to humans' comfort and convenience, it was a methodology that I was taught and that I adopted fully. I cared about the end consumer's benefit above all else. It's really left out a critical stakeholder in all of this equation, and being the planet. I've seen a lot of sort of this damage done firsthand, being in this industry for throughout my career. Wasteful practices of extensive textile scraps on the floor of upholstery factories from inefficient pattern planning, or dumpsters full of first pass pilot runs that weren't good enough and needed another go, or prototypes that just didn't work out, just to name a few. And while I've loved all the work I've been a part of, I had to really grapple with the fact that I was participating in a profession that was causing a lot of this damage that I was really bothered by. And this was something that Lauryn and I really bonded over. And for us, we really saw an opportunity in which we could challenge this world. Was first kind of recognizing that everything that is ever created or ever will be created simply distills down to its essential foundation, which is materials.
Okay, all right. Everyone hear me? All right, hi. I'm Lauryn. I'm creative director of PROWL, Baillie's good friend and business partner. So I'm an industrial designer, but not as deep as Baillie. We call ourselves a T-shaped partnership. So Baillie's gone super deep, ID to her core. And meanwhile, I've taken this, like you could say, an ADHD path around the design table. So every time I was curious about something, I would just point and shoot and go there. So I've done everything from brand strategy, industrial design, material innovation, bunch of different industries. I won't take you on that journey too deeply. But kind of how that all started was with a protagonist in my life, which was my professor at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. Any RPI people in the crowd? Dang it, right. Small school, it's okay. And my professor, who has now left us, left the world, his name was Bert Swersey, and he was known for asking this question, and he would always say, like, question everything. But really his motto was, don't do nonsense. How he said it behind closed doors was, don't do bullshit. So that became, I guess, one of the themes in my personal story of my life. So in discovering design, in finding my path, who knows if we'll ever find our path, right? But the one I'm carving, I discovered material innovation, new bio-based materials that many of us have been talking about during our time here at Sea Change. And I saw that as not doing bullshit, right? Not doing nonsense. And so I kind of latched onto it. I would hunt, I would read, I would watch. I just like fully immersed myself in that world and just constantly was looking for different brands to work for and looking for different people to work for to see where can I have an effect, where can I find someone that's working on this problem too. And so I never found it, but kind of spent my career looking for it. And it's all, you can kind of like base all of this around this new theme and shift that's been happening in Baillie in my career, which is the shift from human-centered design to our theme, which is what some people are calling earth-centered design or regenerative design. At Sea Change, you've probably heard those words already this week, but it is a generally new field. A little bit of another personal story. Okay, another question. How many of you have been to the Biofabricate conference? All right, that's a mistake. All of you need to go. Don't miss Sea Change, but go to Biofabricate. I discovered in my hunting and in my searching for people who are working on these problems and working towards material innovation, I discovered this conference just by searching on the internet about 10 years ago. Paid my own way, went by myself, which was very unlike me, and just was blown away. I'd say that this show probably changed the chemical properties of my brain. And I finally found people there who were actually doing something about this shift in environmental design, regenerative design. There's Molly from Mango Materials who was in our lab yesterday. So some of the people who are there are now people we see as pioneers who are doing something about this, right? The owners of MycoWorks, Mango Materials, the founder of Ecovative, the mycelium company, who also was a student of Bert Swersey, who did not do bullshit. So this changed me. I went to every single Biofabricate conference I possibly could. And it was a room of scientists, it was a room of designers, but I still saw that there was just this like gap between the creatives in the room and the people in the lab who were actually making these new materials. So what did I do? I wrote a cold email to the founder of Biofabricate. She's a very busy woman, but she came from fashion and now works in biotech. And I asked her straight up, like, please help me. This changed my life. I need to know the answers. How do I bridge this gap between creativity and biotech? How do I actually take part in that? And very busy lady, did not get a response. But now, in hindsight, I actually discovered this like not that long ago. Not hearing back from her was actually the answer because she had to carve that own path herself. And so we discovered that the bridge didn't actually exist, so we were going to have to make it. So back to this material revolution. What Baillie and I call the Petri dish effect or the sample effect is something that is happening, right? It's really, really difficult to take materials out of the lab and apply them to products. Why is that hard? It's hard because of problems with scale, getting things to work in existing manufacturing lines. Price, always a problem. But the only way to get over that is to actually be working towards it. And Baillie and I were, over many, many nights of drinking wine and talking about design, we're like asking ourselves, like, all right, who can we work for that's doing that? Like, what studios are doing that in industrial design at a scale that's actually worth like writing home about, that's not like an art project? And it didn't exist. So if no one was going to do it, no one was doing it, or we hadn't found anyone who was doing it, then we had to do it ourselves, right? So that's where we decided to start PROWL, which is our business that we started together not that long ago. And what is PROWL? PROWL is an industrial design and research studio that is based in San Francisco. We work to do exactly what I just described, which is employ new materials, new technologies, and manufacturing processes more responsibly. Again, like, this is not easy work. We're not claiming to know all the answers. That's why our name is PROWL. It actually means that we're hunting for answers because each one of our clients has a different climate journey. So you can't expect that what's going to work for you or your brand is going to work for someone else. It's going to be an uphill battle for everyone, so you need to have support. And we just happen to be the ones willing to like roll up our sleeves and like, let's go for it. So that's what we do. And when we first started our business, we kind of had this idea that we would be able to talk to the brands who we had relationships with and who all had these climate goals and be embedded and just start working on the product, right? Like they already have their climate goal set. They already kind of know where they're headed, and we could just help them get there through product design. But what we learned was so many people are worried about the bottom line that are working in-house that they didn't actually have the way to communicate what they needed to do or know where to begin. So oftentimes our projects actually start at this incubation period of how are you actually talking about your climate effect, and how can we use storytelling to help you get to a place to then create a brief for a new product. So we're a bit of an oddball in that way, where we don't just do ID, we do also like storytelling and narrative building.
I think in order to kind of to be able to practice and embody this theme of bridging this gap between what's not happening and what we want to happen, in order to challenge this kind of wasteful, toxic world that we sort of had a hand in creating, we had to kind of reinvent our own design process in this, and establish our own new framework for how we were going to tackle each new brief, or even build the brief in the first place. In this framework, it's a super holistic process. We're incredibly collaborative, not only with our clients, but with manufacturing and with materials, with these lovely ladies as an example, and establish a new concrete set of principles that we measure ourselves against time and time again, to make sure we're doing positive impact. Since our founding, we've been able to have a hand in developing projects and products for a handful of industries, which has been so exciting. A few of our projects are here on the screen, which include, upcycling lost sawdust to create a 3D printed dining collection with some of our great neighbors. Model number.
Crowd. Yeah, there he is. Model number.
An electric camping trailer, kind of reinventing the future of experiencing the outdoors with a lighter footprint, and plant-based lighting collection, just to name a couple that we can share. But while clients are kind of waking up to this way of thinking and recognizing this as a need, and to sort of shift the way they're operating and including us in their workflow, we were finding ourselves saying we can't really wait for everyone to catch up. If we're seeing this urgent need now and we want to help craft a new future from the damaging ways from whence we came, we had to sort of chart our own way a little bit. And so in addition to our client-driven work, we also work on and incubate a lot of products in-house on our own, very proactively, in order to take a stab at what could be. So one of these projects is our Peel chair, which debuted earlier this spring at Milan Design Week. And in going into this project, we asked ourselves, what if a product only lasted as long as it needed to? And to put our stakes even a little higher, we turned our gaze at fast furniture as a testing ground to bounce that question against, which currently is contributing to 12 million tons of waste a year in the US alone to our landfills. Everything about this chair, the frame, the removable cushions, the snap fit features that we developed to hold the cushion on, are all entirely made from hemp, which is a superpower crop that I love a ton. It's got a rich history. It's nothing new. It's kind of looking backwards to look forward a little bit with the use of this.
Badass crop.
Badass crop. By working really collaboratively with material inventors and factories, we were able to produce this all compostable dining chair. So we're pretty excited about it.
And sometimes it's not just sometimes the things that we're incubating from within aren't just something that we're showing at an exhibition as a provocation. something that's new to our studio is, and this is very early phase, you guys are actually the first to see this, we're incubating businesses out of our studio as a way to get things out into the world. So when you have your finger on the pulse, like many of you do, like we do, we're meeting all these new material companies all the time, or meeting factories, and sometimes you just see an opportunity and you have to go. And so we started this business called Gob. It is an irreverent brand about going hard, but it's also the world's first plastic-free, we're shooting for the world's first plastic-free single-use earplug. You might be saying, like, seriously, guys, earplugs, really? Like, is that going to make a dent? After we started researching this, we kind of just were like, oh my God, we make 40 billion of these a year, and it's a huge problem because they were invented in the 60s or 70s, and since then they've been made out of PVC and petroleum. So you're putting petroleum into your ears. Your ear holes do not like that. So other than the environmental impact of earplugs, there's also a health effect. So now, because of the heavy use of AirPods and because of people getting back to going to live events, 1 in 7 young people under the age of 35 actually are at super high risk of permanent hearing damage. So this is actually a preventative thing too. So we're growing this right now. If anyone wants to talk about it, we are all ears. I didn't mean to do that. But anyway, all this goes to show that, as you can probably tell, we're much more optimistic now, and we're really working towards this regenerative future that we're helping work towards every single day. And now that we're our own protagonists and we have our theme and we're very focused in that regard, we're feeling pretty good. So yeah, that's our story.
So we can go into a traditional question, or we can talk through, we can answer questions about stories. Any way you want to take this. Open to however anyone starts.
Anybody scribble anything down on those note cards?
Anything, any revelations on it? Yeah.
So I'm curious if you've had an instance where, as you're working with an organization about a product design, that you're asking questions to the point where they decide that the product doesn't even need to exist. From a sustainability perspective, there's lots of stuff that you could argue shouldn't exist. So I'm just kind of curious if that has ever happened.
It hasn't happened yet, but I think what you're hitting on is really valid on, while it hasn't happened to us yet, I think this mental reframing, not even just on our side of offering a service, but on a client side, is ripe for like presenting that opportunity. Very, I wouldn't be surprised. And I think we also are in a seat where we should be asking also if that product should exist. So while it hasn't happened yet, I could imagine, it will.
Yeah, most of our clients are pretty, very future focused. And so a lot of them have the environment baked into their ethos already. Some might argue that they don't need us as much as others, but that's pretty much how things have rolled so far.
Did anybody think about, during the course of this, talking about world and theme and protagonists, does anything come to mind that is a particularly difficult challenge that you're seeing in your world, in your sphere of influence, your industry, your market? Because I think that's, once you think about what you care about, that is really your world. So I don't know if anything came to mind for anybody on that. What's your number one challenge?
I think as I'm listening to the content, the first thing I thought about is how do I make it relatable to my audience? How do I make them connect? Because I think a lot of times we think of environmentalism, and to be honest, my grandmother's like, "Are you hugging trees and eating granola?" I'm like, "No, that's not the context." But it's there's there's an association to it. So how do we make it more so relatable in the sense of like, it's just connecting to yourself by going through nature. And I think sometimes when we put a lot of isms on things, it disconnects us. So I'm just more so thinking like, how do I make it just normalized in like your day-to-day functionality? So
Well, I
that was
think
the first thing I
that
thought
seems
about.
like a problem that you've identified in your world, right? And, you know, taking that place as a protagonist in it. And the theme, you know, that as Kristina said, was like the trickiest thing always to figure out. You know, I mean, it's like when somebody asks you, you know, who are you? That's a horrible question. Nobody
I'm a
wants
walking
to.
contradiction.
Yeah, exactly.
That's normally my answer.
Yeah. I do want to note on that just about environmentalism
Yeah.
for a second before we move on to another. I think that a lot of people are working on this. I'm sure some of you are in the room right now, but there's almost like this pretentious communication that happens from that world where there are lots of words like biopolymers thrown out there we were talking about this in a lab yesterday actually, about how some of these words are a little bit like pretentious and we expect people to know what they mean. Most people don't know the difference between compostable, biodegradable, and all of that. So then you end up not even knowing what to do and you get overwhelmed. So I think that master communicators have like a lot of work that could be done in that realm. And I want to note that that's a really important point. Yeah. Another theme over here.
What matters right now and what will matter most in the future was an inquiry question that you presented to us. And full transparency, I looked up the definition of protagonist because just to remind myself, what is it that you're inviting me to think about? An advocate or champion of a particular cause or idea. I'm reflecting on how what matters to me right now is sometimes not in alignment with what matters to others, right? Like, I'm inviting us to think about these identities, our salient identities that are just deeply influencing what my theme is. Like, my theme right now is Black liberation. My theme right now is love and healing. But I feel I get filtered around how I can express my emotions. And I'm looking at a panel of, as you said, badass women, right? And then if you keep adding other identities, being a person of color, being a queer person, being a person of not coming from a resource background, it's really hard to stay in the fight to do this work because I'm trying so hard the world is burning. This world is burning around us right now. And as a mother, you know, as an educator, all of these things, it's really hard, I guess, to be this protagonist. Like, I know my assignment. I'm blessed. I woke up today. Like, I didn't get out of bed yesterday. Like, so I'm trying to do this thing called life. But when you're trying to do it, though, it's hard when people aren't in alignment with the vibe that you're trying to put forth, you know? And some of it is because this is my day-to-day experience. I have been Black for 41 years. Like, the nooks, the crannies, the joy, the pain, and everything in between. And you have a storytelling set. How do I even invite this room to understand my lived experiences? And I mean, that's the power of the story, right? Like, and so I'm just wrapping my head around the calling that we all need to serve as protagonists, right? Like, I'm reflecting on who has been that champion in my life, from the 6th grade teacher, Mrs. Welch, that gave me my first public speaking opportunity, you know, to, you know, former directors of this community that did profound change that was needed. Human experience is so difficult and beautiful and messy. How are we calling ourselves to stay in this? Because I'm not gonna lie, like, doing this thing called life is so hard. Like coming out of getting like, it is so hard because not everybody is in alignment with what you're trying to be the protagonist about. But you know, because you see the people, you're on the ground, you know the pain, you're in the conversations. So I guess I'm just reflecting on that. What matters right now and what will matter most in the future. But nothing has changed for me in some of the causes that I'm fighting for because history just keeps repeating itself. Is there any, I guess, insight or bits to how to dismantle this shit? Because we're just in repetitive patterns of...
I would recommend, as you think about your story, that you shrink your world. It's not all your world to solve. You can't fix all of that. You need to right size what you can control, whether that is your homestead and how your kids are raised, whether that's your relationships with other adults in your life, whatever that is for you, whatever you need to right size that world to what you as the protagonist can succeed against. You understand? Sort of, that's the first thing. Like, get rid of that overwhelm.
Oh, yes, which is what I did 5 weeks ago after organizing. I've cut my circle so intimate for that reason.
And the other thing that I think is really important to remember in this cause we're all engaged in is that I find great comfort in the metaphor of the ant farm. I'm an ant, and I'm over here on my little corner, and I'm keeping it clean. And if you're over in your corner and you're keeping it clean, and everybody in the farm is keeping their ant farm clean, then we're eventually going to have a really fabulous, clean farm all the way across that all of us can enjoy. But all I can control are my little grains of sand over here. That is what is so overwhelming about this. If you sit and look at it for very long, there's only so much that you as a single protagonist can do. And so there's a story that you're telling about you as a single protagonist, and I'm just going to go out on a limb and just suggest that might be about you being a mother is the most important thing, and I say that because I'm a mom and I find that really important. And then as you widen the world and widen your theme, bring other protagonists in to carry that with you. You cannot fight good and evil alone. You can't win it alone. So in a way, I'm not speaking so much from a career standpoint, but just from a personal standpoint. You cannot look at the whole problem. It is too overwhelming. There are too many things broken. You just have to pick a piece of your ant farm that you're going to clean and have faith that other people are cleaning their parts. And as I say, bring in other protagonists when you need them. And I wish I had more insight than that, but that's really what I would say to you at this moment.
When you say shrink your world, that reminds me of the three of us, and you as well, where we've kind of aligned our passions and our skill sets into an area that we could have an effect on, because we can't actually solve the whole problem ourselves.
Right.
So I think that seems pretty aligned with your question of and your response of shrinking your world. Because, and then we talk about this in the report we put together, which is very dense, but we talk a lot about aligning with an area that you can actually have an effect so that you can see the progress. Because if you're, chugging away at something that's way too big, then you're not going to get anywhere, but get somewhere where you can actually get into a jog or a sprint. That's how we're able to actually get anywhere, because we're like, all right, industrial design, materials, we got this. And museum, getting people closer to nature, communication, storytelling. That's how we've done it, but we still don't have the answers, obviously. But I think we have shrank our worlds.
Make your world one you can be the lead of. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah, thank you.
Great question.
Any other
Other
world
thoughts?
theme protagonist questions?
Anybody want to workshop their trio?
Yeah, let's workshop a trio.
Yeah.
Somebody.
Who has it all figured out here? Oh, in the back.
So I do coral reef restoration, and we're in the middle of environmental disaster this summer in the Keys, where everything's just, they're boiling. They're not even bleaching, they're just dying. So the connection to the environment conversation you were talking about that you had involved in with the magazines, quick thought about how you connect people that are nowhere near the water to the fact that this is the earth, this is, we're all connected to this, in a way in storytelling that is difficult to tell somebody who's never been underwater before what it's like to be on a coral reef that's healthy. Just a quick thought on that one. I know that's probably it's a large one to be able to go do, but and I know we do a lot of imagery, a lot of video, a lot of photography, storytelling around that. But any thoughts about how to connect somebody who's never seen an elephant, the old, what part of the elephant you're looking at here that's never seen it before, to create some awareness around that?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I had never seen an elephant in the wild until right before the pandemic. So I was one of those people. And I think that that's why what I believe in and what we are doing with our startup is bringing people that sensory connection to those types of experiences that they don't have in their normal day-to-day world. So creating a space and creating, even content that brings to you that feeling of the smell and the touch and, in some cases, the taste of those elements of, underwater on a coral reef. I think that if you can bring that to people, especially with all of the technology that we have now and all of the ways that you can do experiential design, that's one method that we're using to accomplish that goal. And I think what you're asking about in the, right now immediate sense that's accessible to everyone, not necessarily someone who comes to a physical space to experience it, is, the idea that you might not be able to help people get access to coral or go underwater or go diving, but you can, bit by bit, inch by inch, encourage exposure to the most basic experiences in nature. So going to the park, walking around your neighborhood. Like I said, even myself, I had assumed that that would be part of my day-to-day life, in the suburban upbringing I had. And then in the 20-something years since, I have gotten really disconnected from that. And I think it's about reminding people that it doesn't take so much, and then bit by bit getting there. So I don't know if that answers your question, but.
I was going to actually add to it.
Yeah, please.
One of the concepts behind the museum is that we would actually bring people to places to allow them to experience it through interactive experiences. So I'm not talking about flying people to the coral reefs, but for instance, I could imagine a 3-story tall coral reef that you can crawl through and find things, and that would just help people bring their heads there and see that from a different space. It's very hard to understand what's going on with the coral reefs unless you've actually experienced it and learned something about it. And I feel like that's one of the biggest problems we have that we hope to solve at the museum, is bring people to a place where they can experience things they couldn't have before and engage with the challenge, at least understand it.
And having, even if you don't ever have a personal experience with a coral reef or, at the bottom of the Grand Canyon or something else like that, that's amazing and spectacular, you potentially can work on the general sense of respect for nature, the understanding of, the connectedness that we have to it. And that extends into things that you will never know. Into parts of the earth that you will never visit and never have any connection to, and the caring of that goes beyond, I think, your own personal one-to-one time that you've had with it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Anybody else?
My challenge is around silos. I live in two worlds. I'm a school teacher during the day, and experience we're all probably used to is math class to science class to English class, no real collaboration there. In another life, I work with my wife, who's a handcrafter, a sustainable upcycling handcrafter, and there's so much skill and talent, especially in Vermont. And we've struggled, how can we connect with large industry and bring these skills and dispositions to the apparel industry? A visual image, I think, when I try to picture this, is you walk into a paint store and everything's nice and neat in paint cans. Here's your orange, here's your yellow, here's your red. Very sterile, not much life in that. How do we create a Jackson Pollock painting, which is real life, all colors mixed? That's collaboration. I think it speaks to a lot of other concerns I hear of how if we're going to become earth-centered, I believe we need to collaborate.
Agreed.
How can we break down those silos and move away from this human-centered design, which is very biased and certain people benefit, others don't. How can we break down those silos and move to earth-centered creations?
That's like the work of our lifetime. I don't have an answer, but I have an idea, and it's just based off of how we've tried it so far. So in our community, design, physical design, things can get a little competitive. It's like, who's going to get that job? Who's going to get this? Who designed that? Is their name on it? Yada, yada, yada. Who got that? And it can get super competitive. And we've forced ourselves to leave our egos at the door in a way in order to like get over that, so that it would enable us to collaborate with people who could actually get stuff done, right? And so for us, it's been about forming partnerships that are a little bit out of the norm. We've worked with manufacturers in ways that is kind of out of the ordinary. We've gone to we've done our own exhibitions, which normally brands do, but us as designers have done. And we've partnered with folks like the Museum of Earth, who are a completely new type of platform. And we're leaning on each other as experts in a similar arena. Like, we're all in the same arena, but like we all have a different, like maybe we're the midfielders, they're the goalies, right? Like, we all have our spot and we're like really good at what we do. So I think it's a matter of finding people who are like, who kind of like fill in your puzzle. I like the painting metaphor, but for us, it's been about like, who's doing something really cool that we couldn't ever like maybe imagine being able to interact with. All right, let's send them a cold email. And you kind of just have to like be relentless and kind of like, all right, I don't know, we don't have much time, so like let's just see if anyone catches. And the people who are like genuinely interested are going to respond in like an hour.
It's amazing what happens with those cold emails.
Yeah, actually that's how we met.
Yeah.
We met because I sent a cold LinkedIn message.
Yeah, to me, and lo and behold, I had already been stalking them. So
yeah, that's
very,
awesome.
it was flattering.
So, yeah,
on both sides.
You're out of the norm comment. We have to get
Yeah.
out of the norms
yeah,
that we've been living in. We have to have that courage. That
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
yeah.
Yes.
Got one more down here.
This is more an observation than a question, perhaps, but I've been listening to all these different voices, different stories, and wanted to say I really appreciate what a mosaic of different stories, different focuses are throughout the room today. The social element, personal, the environment, materials, education, society and culture, all of these individual stories, as you were saying, what can you do in your space in the world, but also the beautiful interaction between how all of these pieces fit together. How does environment stewardship interact with society, with culture, with policy? And I think that story of how these all tie together is a really beautiful piece of the work that you're doing, and also part of why Sea Change has been so magical. Thank you.
See, change
Agreed.
fall out.
Yeah.
We both start smiling. Awesome. All right. Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much for
Thank
joining
you
us.
all.